I'm joined now by Coulton, who is the head of European sovereign ratings at Fitch. First of all, welcome this morning. Can you talk us through the Spanish downgrade? What was your decision? Why now?
Really, the decision was based on a reassessment of the medium-term growth fundamentals for Spain, and a number of aspects make us concerned about that. It's an economy which has a high level of private sector debt, particularly construction companies. It's not just the household sector in Spain, like it is in the US and the UK. It's a country which has seen reforms in the last 15 years and seen some restructuring, but still major supply-side inflexibilities in the labour market side, and that's going to make the economic adjustment difficult for Spain. It's got a lot of external debt, and that external debt will need to be serviced. The interest payments are going to go out of the country, weakening domestic demand.
Now, Zapatero has been doing perhaps the best he can. He's come up with some quite stringent budget cuts. He's also in negotiations with the labour market. Do you think he isn't doing enough?
I think in terms of the fiscal response, we think that's been pretty strong, actually. Right. There are some risks to its implementation, but I think it's likely to go. It is likely to go through, including the 2011 budget cuts, and that's one of the reasons we've got a stable outlook on the rating. We've seen this as a fairly aggressive policy response, certainly by the standards of most developed countries. Where I think we're more disappointed is two areas. One, the labour market reform discussions. We really don't have a strong feeling for how that's going, what we're really going to see on that side. The unions are going to resist that quite strongly, and that's going to make wage adjustment more difficult in Spain. And the second factor is the financial sector, not the major banks, which we still think are very strong, but the Caja sector. A year ago, the Spanish authorities set out a plan to restructure that sector. Frankly, we've had very slow progress in doing it, and our concern is that that's going to affect the supply of credit to the economy. Now, the labour markets is an interesting one, because obviously you've got very high unemployment across the board, very high youth unemployment in Spain as well. Are you just concerned that the unions are not going to get on board with Zapatero's plans, or are you concerned that the plans themselves don't seem to be moving forward? The plans themselves are a bit of a black box. We don't have a very strong feel for actually what's being discussed, to be honest. But you know, the problem they've got is it's what's called a dual labour market, which you have a sort of flexible sector where it's all temporary contracts, which is incredibly flexible. Companies have just not rolled over those contracts, and that's why the unemployment rate shot up so quickly. But then you have a very heavily protected main labour market, and that means that the unemployment rate, even though it's 20%, is not putting as much pressure on wages as otherwise would be the case, and it's going to take longer for Spain to restore its competitiveness as a result. Right.
Now let's look at those. Look at the cajas, because it does appear to the outside world, at least, that the Spanish government is trying to consolidate things there. You think that they haven't moved quickly enough?
Well, I don't think it's a lack of intent to say. You know, it's about last June, July, I think, that they announced the fund for restructuring the sector. They allocated up to 99 billion euro to do the job. I think they've met a lot of political resistance. A lot of these cajas, the governance of them is quite unusual. It's quite difficult unless there's been some, you know, overt breach of sort of supervisory standards for the Bank of Spain to intervene them, and that's why it's been difficult for them, frankly, to do it. But the fact is that sector's not being restructured fast enough, and that's going to be a constraint on credit to the Spanish economy.
Regional government in Spain is quite powerful as well.
It is, yeah. Madrid doesn't have as much power as it would like.
Now, you downgraded on Friday. That was after Zapatero's getting those budget cuts through by just one vote in Parliament. Was that in any way significant?
Well, it was significant. I mean, we did want to see the austerity measures, you know, put in place, because that's an important part of our assessment, as I mentioned earlier. I don't think we'd have gone to a stable outlook if we hadn't seen such a strong policy response. So
you're saying really that the austerity plans gave it a stable outlook. Looking ahead at other countries throughout Europe, do you think that the austerity plans in themselves are actually more likely to to stop a ratings downgrade happening? I'm thinking of the 22nd of June here in the UK.
You know, we've said throughout our commentary, if you've been following it over the last year or so, that the AAAs, and we've said the UK, France, Spain, the countries where a stronger policy response is necessary to underpin confidence in the medium-term public finances, and that's still our position. It is going to be the policy response that's going to be very important as we go through the rest of this year.
So what are you looking for from George Osborne on the 22nd of June?
Well, I think we need to, you know, we've said pretty clearly that we we think the existing plans as set out in the previous budget for the medium-term path, it was a pretty slow pace of deficit reduction. It was a pace of deficit reduction wasn't really backed up with the specifics in terms of most of it was on the spending side, and yet they hadn't detailed how they were going to do it. So details and a faster deficit reduction path.
Europe as a whole, looking at the sovereign debt crisis at the moment, are you expecting that you're going to have to make any more ratings downgrades elsewhere?
Well, you know, we're in a difficult period where public finances, frankly, have never deteriorated this much in the post-war period. You know, in terms of where we've gone from 2008 to where we are now. So it's going to be a challenging time. I think that, you know, one of the key issues will be when does economic growth come back? Because once economic growth returns, then you start to get into a scenario of maybe some positive fiscal surprises. You start to see the revenue numbers look a bit better. Governments are more willing then to take the consolidation action. But we're sort of in this sort of in-between period where there's not quite enough confidence in the growth. There's a bit of prevarication on the tightening, and that's why it's going to be pressured for a good few months.
And it's going to be difficult times, isn't it? Because you need those deficit-cutting measures, and yet those very measures are the ones that stop the economy from
It's true,
recovering.
but what people often forget is that there's quite a long time lag between tightening fiscal policy and the economy. And the economy right now is still benefiting a lot from the fiscal loosening that was taking place late 2008 and 2009. And on the flip side, you know, governments tightening fiscal policy in 2010, 2011. It's going to be 2012 really before you see the maximum impact of that. So I don't think you need to get too concerned about that.
OK. Brian Coulton, thank you very much indeed.